The National Fire Protection Agency estimates there are 20,000 RV fires every year. There are also deaths and injuries related to carbon monoxide and propane exposures. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can minimize your risk to these dangers while traveling in your RV. Hi everyone, I'm Sean, one half of Chickery's Travels. Julie's not here today on this video, but we're going to talk through some important safety tips for you to be aware of when you're traveling in your RV. The first one we're going to talk about is smoke detectors. You should have at least one smoke detector in your RV. If there are multiple rooms, you should have one in each room. And the important thing about RV smoke detectors is that you need to have a dual sensor smoke detector. A typical sensor detects ionization from a cooking fire or a brake fire or a fire like that. The second part of the dual sensor is called a photoelectric sensor, and this detects smoke from an electronic fire or from an electronic appliance such as a refrigerator or a microwave oven when it starts to catch on fire. If your smoke alarm uses a 9-volt battery or any other type of battery for that matter, replace the battery when you change your clocks for daylight savings time or daylight standard time. This year, 2021, daylight savings time is coming up, March 14th. So that's a good time to go in and change the batteries in your smoke detector, especially since spring is upon us then, and it will be time to start camping. So go ahead and switch out those batteries. And then some RVs have a hardwired smoke detector that runs off of your 12-volt RV electrical system, and then it will have an internal battery backup for it. And so it's important to make sure your 12-volt system, your batteries are charged, and so that smoke detector will work, and your batteries won't, and your backup batteries in the smoke detector won't wear out. So making sure you have your good batteries in your RV when you start out your travels is a good idea if it is a hardwired smoke detector. For placement of the smoke detectors, you want to place the smoke detector on the ceiling near a sleeping area. If you only have one, if you have multiples, like in our fifth wheel, this Arctic Fox, we have one in like the main kitchen living area, and then we have another one in the bedroom. The important thing about mounting these is to mount them far enough away from ceiling vents or ceiling fans so that the air is not pulling the smoke away from the detector. And then with these smoke detectors, you want to replace them every 10 years. If they're still working after 10 years, you should go ahead and replace them at 10 years. The next type of detector that we're going to talk about is carbon monoxide. And according to the National Fire Protection Agency, carbon monoxide is a gas. You can't see it, you can't taste it, and you can't smell it. So basically, it is truly invisible. And it is found in fumes produced anytime you burn fuel in cars or trucks, small engines like your generator, stoves, lanterns, grills, fireplaces, gas ranges, or furnaces. So basically every time you're heating something or producing heat from an engine, you are producing carbon monoxide. And the most common symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning are headache, dizziness, weakness, upset stomach, vomiting, chest pain, and confusion. Now, you can imagine if you get to the confusion part, you're probably not going to be able to help yourself at that point. So it's important to have a carbon monoxide detector that is going to detect it early so you're not getting any symptoms at all. And an RV has multiple sources of carbon monoxide. Propane burning stove, for instance, the motorhome's exhaust, the generator's exhaust. And the exhaust system doesn't have to be faulty for carbon monoxide to enter the RV. Carbon monoxide can work its way through cracks or broken entry points into your RV. It can find its way in, and since it's a confined space, it can build up rather quickly. So you want to make sure and have a carbon monoxide detector. Make sure you're testing it. And one thing I forgot to say about the smoke detector is make sure you're checking that weekly when you're using your RV to make sure it still works and the batteries are still good. And a lot of times the smoke detector will chirp if the battery is getting low, and you know it's time to change it at that point. The same thing with the carbon monoxide detector. You want to test it frequently when you're using it, when you're using your RV, because you want the carbon monoxide detector to detect that carbon monoxide as early as possible so you can correct the situation and not find yourself in a compromised position because you have carbon monoxide poisoning. And these, it's recommended that you replace these every 5 to 7 years. The next one is a propane detector, or an LP detector. And this is important because a high concentration of propane will take away the oxygen in the air. So it kicks the oxygen out and the propane molecules build up. And if less oxygen is available to breathe, you can imagine what happens. You get rapid breathing, rapid heart rate, clumsiness, emotional upsets, and fatigue as the result. As less oxygen becomes available, then you get nausea and vomiting, collapse, convulsions, coma, and even death. And if you get to that point, you really can't help yourself. So having a good detector to be able to detect the propane buildup is so important in your RV. Again, it's a small space and that stuff can build up fast. The NFPA says that refrigerators, furnaces, ovens, and stovetops all can use propane in an RV. So you want to check them for leaks. You can take it into a service place. They can do a leak test for propane. You can also keep an updated gas leak detector on board, which is what we recommend. Get a propane detector. Put it in the appropriate spot in your RV, and again, test it and make sure that it is working correctly every week that you're in your RV. And these should be replaced also, the same as the carbon monoxide detectors, every 5 to 7 years. And then there are other propane safety devices that you may consider and are very helpful if you do have a propane leak. There's an emergency shutoff safety device for propane systems. They do make them for RVs. And in the event of a leak, these will shut off 100% of the propane supply immediately. So it takes a little bit of the worry away of getting a propane poisoning from a leaky propane system. And you can find these, there's several manufacturers of these propane shutoff devices, and definitely check them out as a safety feature for your RV. The next thing we're going to talk about are fire extinguishers. And like I said, the NFPA estimates 20,000 RV fires every year. So the rule is the RVs must have at least a BC rated fire extinguisher by the exit. But we think you should have more fire extinguishers. You should have 3 really in your RV. 1 in the bedroom, 1 in the kitchen/living area, and 1 that's accessible from the outside of your RV, such as in a storage bay or a place like that, or even in your tow or towed vehicle. You should have 1 that you can access without having to go inside the RV. The most common area for fires to start in an RV is in the kitchen or cooking area. And then the engine area is next, your running gear, or wheel area is the last high kind of frequency area for fires. And just as a caution, only adults who know how to operate it should use it. You should never have kids operating the fire extinguishers, and you should only try and fight the fire if it is a small fire. Once it spreads and becomes a big fire, your fire extinguisher is not going to help you very much, and it could cause injury because of how close you have to get in order for the fire extinguishers to be effective. So let's talk a little bit about the different fire extinguisher ratings. So Class A is for things like ordinary combustibles, such as wood, paper, fabric, plastics, things like that. Then there's a Class B extinguisher, which is for flammable liquids and gases, gasoline, oils, things like that. Class C is for electrical equipment. And then you have two other ones. Class D is for combustible metals and metal alloys. And Class K is for fires and cooking devices that use vegetable or animal oils and fats. So luckily, they do make a Class ABC fire extinguisher that is effective against those first three combustible materials, which are the most common that you're going to find. And so we recommend getting an ABC fire extinguisher inside your RV, preferably two inside, one in your sleeping area and one in your living/kitchen area. And we use a refillable or rechargeable fire extinguisher, and we have the H3R type, and this is an H3R ABC fire extinguisher. And this is a solid construction. It's metal parts. And the nice thing about this is it can last a lifetime because it's rechargeable. Parts are replaceable. So if you're interested in having a good fire extinguisher that's going to last you much longer than probably your RV will last, consider getting a rechargeable fire extinguisher. We like H3R. It seems like very good quality, and you can stand 8 feet away and still use this fire extinguisher on a fire. So that's really good. And no affiliate with these folks, but we do use this in our RV. They also, so the problem with the ABC extinguishers is that they're going to make a mess when you put out a fire. So another type of extinguisher that we carry in our RV that H3R also makes, it's called the Halotron Halgard fire extinguisher. It has Halotron in it. H3R has all UL listed fire extinguishers, which is a requirement in many states that you have that. But this one, this Halgard, is a clean agent fire extinguisher. So this will put out the fire, and then it quickly goes from a liquid into a gas. So it eliminates the big mess that you have to clean up. It is a little bit more expensive than a traditional ABC fire extinguisher, but the payoff, if you ever have to use it, is in the cleanup, and you won't have that cleanup that you would normally have with the ABC fire extinguisher. And all fire extinguishers have monthly and annual maintenance requirements on them. So make sure in your fire extinguisher, you're keeping up with the maintenance requirements for that particular extinguisher. And once the life expectancy is over, make sure you replace it. That's another good thing about a rechargeable, is you can take it to a place that recharges fire extinguishers, and they can do that for you. And that saves you from having to throw out a non-rechargeable fire extinguisher and having to go purchase a new one. You can just take this one to get service done, and you're done. And then you want to make sure that you, again, only try and extinguish small fires. We can't emphasize that enough. If your RV is engulfed, your fire extinguisher isn't going to do anything but get you injured. So make sure you know the fire extinguisher as well. Like this one, I said, you can stand 8 feet away and still be effective at extinguishing the fire. Some you have to stand 4 feet or 6 feet. So actually look at your fire extinguisher before you actually need it and see what the requirements are for using that fire extinguisher as far as distance away, how you squeeze the handle, how you pull the pin, all that stuff you want to know ahead of time before you actually need the fire extinguisher. Always use the PASS acronym for using an extinguisher. P is pull the pin, A is aim at the base of the fire, S is squeeze the trigger, and the other S is sweep side to side. And many times the fire extinguisher directions say to, squeeze this trigger until the fire extinguisher is fully extinguished or is fully is empty. So make sure again and read the directions on your fire extinguisher. Another way to help prevent fires or stop them quickly is using a fire suppression system. There's some companies that make these. We know of one, it's called Propane. Again, no affiliate, we're just aware of it and we use it in our RV. And these will automatically discharge when a certain level of heat is detected, and it's a chemical, and these will discharge. And it's great to put these in high likelihood fire areas such as your engine compartment, your generator compartment, or your battery and electronic management compartments where there can be fires. A couple of just general maintenance type things for helping prevent fires in your RV is ensure your power cord connecting your RV to a campground's electricity supply is in good condition. You want to replace any damaged cords immediately and make sure you're using the right gauge cord to handle the electric load, or else that could in itself cause a fire. You also want to have your RV's brakes checked. If you have a dragging brake or a rubbing brake, that can create enough friction to ignite the tire or even ignite brake fluid and cause a fire that way. If your tire pressures are too low, that can also cause a fire in your tires. So make sure you're checking those tire pressures and getting those appropriately filled when necessary. And then always check your electrical connections. We do this before and after every trip. And one of the reasons for that is 12-volt connections. If they get loose, they can cause a short, and those shorts can cause fires. So again, make sure you're checking those electrical connections and making sure all that stuff is tight. And then just some general stuff. Something that I learned recently, I didn't think about it, but it makes perfect sense once I read it, is if you're pulling over to stop somewhere, let's say you have a problem and you have to pull off the highway and there's not a good shoulder, be very careful, because a hot exhaust pipe or catalytic converter can easily ignite any dry grass under your RV or under your tow vehicle. And that can cause a fire, and that would really ruin your day. And then don't overload the electrical outlets. A lot of people like to use power strips. Make sure that you're not overloading that capacity of that electrical outlet. That could also cause a fire. So now switching gears kind of from devices to first aid. And as RVers, we are many times away from medical assistance. It can be miles and miles away. I know we've boondocked out in the desert and there was nothing for miles and miles around us. So making sure you have a good first aid kit with you in your RV may be able to stop further injury until you can get to that help. Knowing what's in your kit and where the items are in the kit is important in the time of emergency. You don't want to have to use that first aid kit and forget what's even in there or forget where it's at. And also make sure other people that travel with you know where your first aid kit is and how it's labeled or how it's organized, because you may be the one needing the first aid and unable to provide it to yourself. We have a Surviveware basic first aid kit. Again, Surviveware is not an affiliate of ours, but that's what we chose to buy. And we also have a Surviveware trauma kit in our RV when we travel, and we also take them hiking. And the great thing about these kits is that they are labeled. Every pocket is labeled of where things are. So if you immediately open it up and you need a splint, it's right there. You can read the label and it's quick. And anybody else that has to use your first aid kit, all they have to do is crack it open and it is there available and easily seen by them where the equipment is. So we really like the Surviveware products just for that reason. And then it's also important, we think, to be CPR or basic life support certified. This knowledge can really help save a life. We've read several stories of RVers that have had to perform CPR on somebody in a campground or somebody out on a hiking trail. So take the time and get CPR certified or basic life support certified. It can certainly come in handy when you're out traveling. And then another caution for you is never use any first aid items that you don't know how to use. You could cause definitely further injury to somebody or even yourself if you're using it on yourself. So we recommend taking a basic first aid class, and it will teach you the basics that you need to know to help immediately stop any life-threatening conditions. And this is good if you're an RVer who likes to be outdoors, if you like to hike or bike or do water adventures. Taking a basic first aid course is going to be helpful for you and will just give you that peace of mind that you know what to do in case of an emergency. So those are the tips for reducing your risk of dying in your RV. There are probably many more not covered in this video. Please take the time to learn your systems and take the time to do the preventive maintenance and do the checks on those detectors and learn your systems really well in your RV so you're not surprised by anything. And then invest as you can in these safety items so that you can be much safer on the road when you're traveling. So knowledge is power, and we hope these tips gave you something to think about. And until next time, safe travels, everyone.